Hello, listeners. Thank you for tuning into another episode of Rise Above, a podcast from Rogers Behavioral Health. In this episode, like in a lot of our episodes, we're going to be talking about obsessive compulsive disorder. And also, like in many episodes, we're going to be talking to a patient who struggles with OCD and who found Rogers at their lowest point. And before we get into that, I wanted to talk about why these conversations matter. When we talk to people who have lived through these challenges, we learn a lot that textbooks really can't teach us about the human experience behind the struggle, the life that gets lived beneath the stereotypes, and the strategies that actually helped people heal. So thank you for coming along with us. Let's get started. Hello, listeners, and welcome to another episode of Rise Above. Today, I have with me Jana. Jana, say hi.
Hi.
Jana is a former patient of ours who I first met in Nashville. She lives in Nashville. We have a facility in Nashville, but you actually didn't go to that facility, right?
Right. No, because of the many locations Roger offers, I actually went to the facility in Florida. So we'll get
Okay,
into that.
we will definitely get into that. Um, but you were treated for OCD. Um, and today that's what we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about your whole journey. So I guess just to start off, where do you feel like your journey began?
So I first started having symptoms around 10 years old. And what that looked like was very minimal, almost kind of pattern behaviors, which, as you learn to be educated with OCD, is one of the key components. It's repetitive behavior to get anxiety to have relief. Well, I would wash my desk at recess, maybe sit on one spot of the couch, avoid going into McDonald's, Target, whatever place it might be because I considered in my mind it to be contaminated. So I just felt really dirty. And I couldn't quite explain that to my parents, but I, would have this behavior and they didn't quite know what to do and considered it to be a phase. Um, well, fast forward to my sophomore year of college is when it increased, but really that's when I first started seeing tendencies.
Hmm.
And I actually didn't receive proper treatment till Rogers.
So when you say tendencies, what do you mean by that?
So kind of just like those behaviors, just different, the cleaning, the checking, the wanting to do things repetitively, not being satisfied unless I could clean my desk or I could throw my coat that I wore to a restaurant in the washing machine because if not, I could not wear that coat.
Hmm.
Just some things, but I just knew that I had to do it, but I didn't know why.
And I guess I've seen you shared with me photos of what your house looked like before treatment. Do you want to describe what was going on?
Yeah, so fast forward to 2019, my sophomore year of college, as I said, all of my symptoms skyrocketed, and
Yeah.
I do really believe it was due to the transitional period of life, a lot of uncertainties. I had just started college, um, not sure on my major, wasn't sure what the future held, so I was kind of, in that really unknown time. But when it really was the worst was, at when I was at my house because my room was considered my safe, clean spot. And I would walk on paper towels because I felt I couldn't walk on the carpet, even if I wore slippers because I thought that was contaminated from outside shoes.
Hmm.
And my mind would track what was on the shoes to what was on maybe my cat's foot, maybe then it would get on my bed. And so it's just a rabbit trail of your mind just following these what your mind is telling you is contaminated. I
Mhm.
would then, use Lysol wipes all over my body and my hands, so which resulted in, chemical burns, which almost looked like little scratches, really, but which did not combine well with wanting to wash my hands repetitively. So they had no time to heal. Taking showers forever, 4 to 5 hours, and that's not an exaggeration. I mean,
Wow.
just ask my dad about the water bill. It was not a good thing. So I had to make sure everything was absolutely pristine clean, and it was a vicious cycle of needing to just feel clean, which it didn't necessarily mean dirt or germs. So I think that's something to clarify as well. It's not necessarily that I thought it was a sickness or physical dirt that made me feel contaminated, but it was rather just this feeling and
Mm.
this just something was contaminated, which now that we're educated and we know things, know that, you know, the amygdala in the front of our brain is telling us maybe these false signals that might not be true. So
Yeah.
that's kind of, yeah, what my home life was during the roughest time, kind of a little bit of what it looked like.
Right. And yeah, and what I will say is from the photos, it was paper towels on the floor. It was like your water cup wrapped in paper towel. Like
Yes.
just because everything to you was dirty.
Well, even to the point where, let's say I took that 4 to 5 hour shower. To do that again, to go out of my room or go out of the house was such a task that I actually ended up just staying in my room, in my bed all day long. Because going out was so exhausting, to come back in just felt like impossible. So even to do normal tasks like eating or drinking, I remember I was 21 years old and my mom would come to my door and hold a plate of food and be like, "You have to eat." And I'm like, "I don't want to touch it." And, they weren't educated either. So, when you're giving into these behaviors and compulsions and the feelings, they get worse. So,
Mm,
so they just were trying to help me. So she would actually try to feed me with a fork, like, because I wouldn't touch it, but, had to eat.
yeah.
Which is so silly to think about now because I'm like, that should never have to happen. A 21-year-old should not have her mother feeding her. But that's when I realized, okay, this is getting to a point where my daily life and normal tasks are not attainable. So
Mm.
we need to start looking at some options.
And then how did you end up finding Rogers when you were looking for options?
So we had no idea where to turn. When I say we, it's a family effort because I have two siblings and it truly affects the whole family dynamic. And
Mm,
so we didn't have any mental health diagnoses in the family before, especially to this degree. And my dad works in the radio industry, so he had met um, someone involved with the Peace of Mind Foundation, which specializes in OCD and mental illnesses. And so they actually pointed us towards Rogers and said, "Hey, there's a facility close to you." Because I was borderline actually partial hospitalization, so 8 hours a day, not staying
mhm.
overnight, to actually residential, so where I would stay 24/7. And I was not happy about the idea, actually. I
Abstain of
Of
residential?
of any type of treatment.
Oh.
I had seen a psychologist briefly to talk about some things, but to be honest, I grew up not seeing anyone really talk about their mental health and their journey with that and maybe the struggles they had. And I really didn't want anyone to feel the burden of what I was feeling. So I just really, really tried to mask it. And I think
Hmm.
honestly, that's what made it get 10 times worse.
So was it your parents then that really pushed you into it, into treatment?
Oh yeah, yes. So, you know, I realized it was either that or they were going to take me straight to a hospital. It was to that point where I could not see how bad I had gotten, and I had
Mm,
done the phone interview with Rogers to kind of see where my placement was, and didn't want to do that. But then my mom's like, just talk to them on the phone, see what they say, and you know, had to find a facility that had openings. But what was funny is there was multiple locations, but I personally, I love warm weather. I love Florida. I worked for the Walt Disney Company after treatment, so that's a victory thing. But I there was a spot open in Florida and we had family down there. So my parents were like, if we get you into that facility, can you please be willing to go? And I was
mm.
like, fine, we'll do what we have to do. I'll give it a try.
Yeah.
And so that's where we ended up down in the Tampa facility.
It's like you picked your treatment center a la carte. You were like, give me the warm weather treatment center.
Right. I was like, oh, they have palm trees. It could be a little bit nice.
Yeah. But I will say you get there, not a vacation.
No. Oh, goodness, no. And I think I figured that out very quickly that it was going to be a lot of work on myself
Hmm.
to get where we needed to be. But what was interesting, because actually it was, partial hospitalization. So I arrived in the morning, was there, had a lunch break, was there back in the afternoon, kind of like school. Um,
Hmm.
And we stayed at a hotel right across the street. And I remember that I would learn what I needed to learn in a sense of create my hierarchy of my exposures and, meet with the psychiatric nurses and kind of learn what maybe medication would work for me and things like that. But then I would go straight back to my hotel and in one ear, out the next, because I would give in to all my compulsions and act like I didn't hear
Mm.
anything they said. So I basically was checking boxes just to get out.
I always think about treatment as okay, like you go to high school, the last day of school is June 6th or whatever. If you just get to that date,
Yep.
next year you'll move on to the next level, the next grade, right? But with treatment, just getting to the end of treatment doesn't fix you.
Oh no. It is not a list of checking off. It is not a course you fulfill. It is truly something that you have to commit to and realize that no one's going to do the work for you.
Right.
Once I arrived, I actually was a little bit frustrated and angry because I thought once I arrived at Rogers that everyone there would magically fix me. They would wave their
Right.
magic wand or
Right.
tell me these certain things that I would do and boom, it would disappear. But what I really learned to kind of, I don't know, inherit within myself is that no one's going to do the work for you. You need
Mhm.
to, really ride that wave of uncertainty, dive into these exposures because that is the true way to overcome this. And it's going to be difficult, it's going to be hard, but there are tools that you can learn to make it through those things and still achieve what you want to in life because all I knew in the back of my mind was I cannot go back to not leaving my room and potentially getting worse because it will just keep getting worse. And so I just decided I can't do that anymore.
And we will be right back. Real quick, I wanted to take a moment to talk to you about WISE, the Initiative for Stigma Elimination. It unites people across the nation to support those touched by mental illness and addiction. The compassionate approach champions personal stories and powerful connections, fostering healing by reducing stigma through evidence-based practices. Rogers Behavioral Health supports the work of WISE through their Community Learning and Engagement Department. WISE collaborates with a diverse network of organizations and individuals united in the fight against stigma. You can learn more about WISE, explore their 4 key programs, and connect with them by visiting the website www.eliminatestigma.org. And now back to the interview.
Do you remember your first day of treatment?
I do. I remember, going in and I personally, if you know me, I love doing my hair, kind of having some makeup on, finding cute outfit. Well, during this time in my life, I threw my hair back in a ponytail because I felt like brushing it was dirty, didn't wear any makeup, was barely wearing anything I liked. So that just personally, like I wasn't myself. I wasn't,
Mm.
doing things I wanted to. So I, showed up to the best I could and just found my little office that each, patient had for PHP and I was just kind of like, well, here we are, just
I mean, it took a lot of courage just to walk through the door.
it did. And I wouldn't have been able to do it without my mom. She actually came down to Florida with me and was walking alongside me every step of the way because I really needed assistance at the time.
Mhm.
And she kind of witnessed it all. So it was really nice to have her there as well. But I mean, everyone at the facility was wonderful. When you first get there, you don't want to be there. And
Right.
so it's hard. It's hard.
What were the hardest parts for you?
Oh, honestly, working through that hierarchy because I would go, okay, I'm at the lowest one. Maybe my anxiety's um at a 1. I think that's how we said was the lowest. And
Mm.
I would be like, okay, I can touch the door handle completely and not go wash my hand. Well, they're like, okay, well now we'll do the next one. And I'm like, oh, I don't know about that. I just did this. We can't do that. I just
Right.
really was like, I want to stay comfortable. I don't want to face these things that are really challenging for me. And um, so to honestly kind of, because you're gonna get that anxiety to spike. That's the golden treatment. You really have to face it head on. And so to actually keep working through those was probably the hardest thing because it's hard. And
Yeah.
there's, of course, the medication, and I talk about that as well because the facility really helped me find the dosage and the kind that worked best for me. And without that, it wouldn't have allowed me to have just a stable foundation mentally to complete my hierarchy and to talk about cognitive behavioral therapy because, I was so my my emotions and my hormones were just all over the place.
Mm.
So, that was also a very helpful thing through Rogers that I was able to do.
Do you remember, was there a moment where you went, this is working?
Yeah, so I remember I I actually love to eat ice. And so I remember I would love to go to Chick-fil-A, get a big ice water, extra ice, and just, eat the ice and everything, and I would never do that. Well, I remember one weekend we had the weekends off, so we actually had to plan some plans for the weekend because that helps you not to ruminate and to sit in those maybe behaviors. And so me and my mom would go sometimes to Disney Springs. I love to do that. And we went through Chick-fil-A and I was like, "Oh, I really want my ice." But I was like, "Oh, I can't do that." In my mind, I hear this little voice saying, "It's dirty. You don't know who touched the cup." But I was like, "I really want it." So I had the ice and I was like, "This is fine." Like,
Yeah.
I'm fine. And slowly small things that was really kind of bringing myself back. The girl that I knew for my whole life was kind of making her appearance again. And
Yeah.
so, OCD and anxiety weren't in charge for the first time.
Nice.
And that's a very
Now,
small example, but it's like, wow, I can do these things again?
yeah. What would you think your mom would say is the moment she realized things were working?
Oh, goodness. That's a good one. I don't know actually what she would say because I know she'd seen it all and maybe to the point where we were ready to go home, honestly. But I know she saw the progress. But I was there, for PHP for 2 months and really was doing well in a spot where, I was doing good. And I wanted to go home because that was the areas I struggled the most, where I was
Mm.
comfortable, my home, my work, my school, and things like that. And so when I got back home, I think is when she realized, okay, it's working. It's
Yeah.
what we learned is happening because she would often give in to my compulsions by handing me a paper towel to touch my cup or the Lysol wipes or laying down a paper towel for me to walk on because, in her words, she simply was doing what we needed to do to survive.
Yep.
And from a outside perspective, I would totally agree with her. I think, well, my daughter's in this distressful state. We need to help her the best we can. But when you're almost enabling
Hmm.
recovery and you don't know it, it's hard. So that's why education and being able to learn through Rogers was so helpful for just a family aspect because now they're able to help me with getting better versus going backwards.
Right. And then so did your family then, like, what were there classes, or how did your family learn about your situation?
Yeah, basically just from us explaining a lot of different things, and I know that we showed them some resources from Rogers, and just really articulated what my behaviors looked like. I think identifying them and also knowing not when to enable or give in is so crucial. So we
Hmm.
really just verbalized, hey, this is what we learned, this is what it looks like, and avoidance and it can also be a form of compulsion, so you have to be able to identify what's going on. So we really just shared that with them.
And we will be right back. Everyone deserves a chance for recovery. That's what drives Rogers Behavioral Health Foundation. They're helping people get the mental health care they need, from covering treatment costs for those in need, to building clinics where care is hard to find, to funding cutting edge research. They're making real change happen. And guess what? You can help. Head to rogersbhfoundation.org and be part of creating a future where mental health and wellness thrive. And now back to the interview. So, you mentioned going back home after treatment. Did you know, was there a date that your treatment was going to be done, or did your treatment team say, hey, we think you are ready to move on? How did this work?
So, okay, so which this is going to be full transparency. So I actually don't know if this is a good or bad thing, but I actually left against before my treatment was completely done.
Oh my.
And yes, so yes. But I wanted to go because I truly wanted to try my exposures in my own home environment, which I was in a great spot, fine. But I could have probably been there a little bit longer, honestly. And I don't know how, everybody's journey is different and everything is tailored to the individual and what they need. But I truly felt I needed to try what I learned home. So it probably was going to be maybe another month, maybe a couple
Hmm.
weeks. I'm not quite sure my plan entailed, but it definitely, yeah, was going to be longer.
Well, I guess this is an important, a good time to point out that at Rogers, you're not trapped in your treatment
No,
program. You are allowed to
no,
leave
yes.
if you want to.
If you want to, and it wasn't like I just got up and said, "I'm walking out," because
Right. You weren't
Andy, I
leaving
wrote,
out of frustration or
"Oh, no,
anger.
no."
You were motivated and wanted to uh, put these tools in place in your actual life.
Correct. And actually, it's funny you say that though, because when I first arrived, for the initial almost just meeting of taking vitals and, getting some basic information just for everyone to have,
Mhm.
we were sitting there on the couch, and I don't remember if it was a clinician or somebody was just asking me questions. And I looked over at my mom and I said, "I don't want to be here." And she was like, "No, we need to be here." And I just said, "No." And I got up and I walked outside and went down the elevator outside and just stood there and I remember that is not in my nature. And I remember just saying, like, being so angry. I'm like, why do I have to be here? This, this is for crazy people. This is for people who don't know how to do things. But that's not the case. We
Mhm.
are all human beings. We are all normal. We just have this little speed bump that we need to learn to need help to get over. And that is totally okay. But in that moment, I did not think so. But that just, goes along with your point that no one's holding you there. No one's going to make you check a list. No one's going to make you stay for a
Mhm.
certain amount of time. Um, you
You got
know,
to put in the work for yourself. You're doing it for
exactly.
yourself. Yeah.
Yes, do it for yourself 100%. And I wasn't doing it for myself. I wasn't for a while until I, decided, okay, this is this seems to be working for other people. I wonder if I could do that for myself.
Yeah. So you get back home.
Hmm.
What was that like walking into your house? I don't know. Do you have siblings? But
I
you
do.
definitely have. Your dad was there.
Yep.
Um, what was it like going back, and when did they see? I mean, probably almost immediately. Did they see a difference?
So right when I got home, I remember my grandparents were even there to help with my siblings. They weren't young or anything, but just to have family there.
Yeah.
And my grandma had actually cleaned my bathroom. That was probably one of the more sensitive spots for me. That just was very contaminated, and it really triggered me. I kind of had a moment of panic. I was like, "Oh, I didn't that was set in my mind to be clean, and that was dirty, and she might have cross contaminated or this and that." And I did have a moment of freak out, but I was able to be like, "Okay, what do I need to do to move forward? I need to fully embrace how it's been done. I don't need to maybe she did touch that and touch this. That's going to be okay. I need to fully lean into that."
The tools in the toolbox
Yes.
came out immediately for you.
Yes, and I think that's the thing. You don't really realize the tools you have until you use them. You're like, "Oh,
Hmm.
wait, we talked about this. This is something I can actively do in this moment," or knowing what kind of the consequences would be if I gave into that anxiety or the compulsion. It's going to get worse. And so I want to starve that OCD as much as I can. So I'm not going to listen to that.
Yeah. And so since then, you have done a lot of advocacy. You've done a lot of things in your personal life. We are right up against the time here for this episode, but we are going to have you back to talk about all of that stuff. You want to give us a quick, the bullet points? All right. What can people look forward to in the next episode?
Absolutely. So from the journey through Rogers, now I've been able to really use that journey and that story as fuel for the fire to share so that other people don't feel as alone. So through that with advocacy work, I've able to actually just published my first children's book, which is an educational tool for OCD. So it's an OCD narrative for kids. And I've also been able to work with organizations just across the state here in Tennessee, but elsewhere to provide resources, educate, and bring awareness to treatment for OCD.
Well, I look forward to talking to you more about that. Jana, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me today.
Thank you. No, thank you for having me.
And we'll talk again soon.
Sounds good.
Well, listener, as I'm sure you are already aware, that's it for today's episode. I wanted to give a big thank you to Jana for sharing her story, and a big thank you to you, the listener, for listening to her story. I hope that through stories like this, it gives us a clearer picture of what the disorder is truly like, what the process is truly like to get help, and I hope in a little way we break down the stigma. I know that's one of Jana's goals, is to break down the stigma, and hopefully we did that in some small way today. With that, if you know someone who you think should listen to this episode, please feel free to pass it along. Feel free to like and subscribe if you haven't already for new episodes. And as always, if you or someone you care about is struggling with a mental health or substance use disorder, visit rogersbh.org for a free mental health screening. Until next time, thanks again.